much distance and there's nothing connected. Okay. See, there's a street, there's walls, and there's no say, there was nothing, there's a frame. And they extend it out to it's just outside the door of your home. There's something connected, always work together. Say it's fun, bro. Good question. Islam Q&A? Is that what's his name? Walaikum salam. How you doing? Munajjid. Okay, yeah. I know what's like. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that because I'm gonna need to give you my attention. So I can. When can we talk in more detail? So you can listen to. Okay, I just want to get started on this. Where's your tea? Mine had milk and the sister's took it on the right side. Had milk in it. It's
milk?
It's the Yemeni.
You are the same?
There's one out there, yeah.
Sorry,
the milk. Walaikum salam. Dr. Ismail, how you doing, brother? Mashallah, good to see you. I'm good to see you. Yeah. Where is Dr.
Ali is leading your prayer.
The sisters are leave it on before you. See what I'm saying? As they're doing their study. And then how many people can you know? Which one? Yeah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So welcome everyone to another installment in our weekly program, Studying the Sermon, where we, as you all know, we revisit the khutbah of the day. We talk about a little bit additional detail, mention some things that we're unable to mention, delve into some topics we're able to delve into, give you the time constraints of the khutbah, and afford you the opportunity, the audience, the opportunity to contribute to the discussion. Whether that be through your questions, your comments, your critiques, your own experiences with the topic, etc., and so on. And the title of the khutbah today is drawn from the hadith that was at the center of the khutbah. And so the title of the hadith, or the title of the khutbah, the title of the khutbah was An Awful Son of a Tribe. An Awful Son of a Tribe. And the main idea can be expressed in this way. Interpersonal relations are a reality of life. You have to deal with people. It's just the reality of living. You have to interact with people, you have to deal with people, you have to find a way to get along with people and coexist with people. And dealing with some people isn't easy. And so we wanted to highlight one of the tools or one of the approaches our religion has given us to use in our interactions with difficult people. And so this khutbah, which was going to teach us one of those tools, it was centered around a hadith. Can anybody remember the hadith or give me a summary of the hadith that the khutbah was centered around? Anybody remember roughly? I don't have to remember word for word, but anybody remember roughly the hadith that the khutbah was centered around? Tafadali, yeah. Tell me the hadith though. So there was a statement of the Prophet that was at the heart of the khutbah. This one is no better.
So he was talking about someone.
Go ahead. Yeah. Who is he? Who is he? Good. Okay.
And his expression, if you were to hear his expression regarding that person, you would understand that he did not care much for that person. However, when he was around that person, he was friendly. He treated the person friendly.
Hey.
And Aisha questioned, you don't seem to care for this person, but yet you treat him with kindness.
Hey.
And his response was, everyone deserves respect.
Something along that line, right?
Along that line.
Okay. All right, not bad. That was pretty good. Okay. All right, so the hadith, pretty good synopsis, pretty good summary. 80%, 90% on point. So basically the hadith was the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. She mentioned that a man came and the rajulan ista'dhana ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A man came to the Prophet's home asking permission to enter, asking for audience, asking to basically sit with the Prophet and talk through something. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ائذنوا له بئس أخو العشيرة أو ابن العشيرة. He said, give him permission. Okay? What an awful brother of a tribe or awful son of a tribe. So basically, before the man entered, and before he was given permission to enter, the Prophet said this thing which was disparaging. He disparaged him. So then when he entered, فَلَمَّا دَخَلْ أَلَنْ لَهُ الْكَلَامِ. So once he entered, the Prophet spoke to him kindly. And this kind of took Aisha by surprise. He said what he said, and then he behaved the way he behaved. So she asked the Prophet about it. Once he left, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about it. And she said, Ya Rasulullah, qulta ma qulta, thumma lanta lahu al-kalam. She said, O Messenger of Allah, you said what you said about him, but then you were nice to him. And those things don't seem to what? They don't seem to square with one another. They seem hard to reconcile. And so the Prophet responded, he said, Hey Aisha, inna sharra nasi man tarakahu nas aw waja'ahu nas ittiqa'a fuhshihi. He said, Aisha, he said, indeed, the worst of people are the people who people abandon them or they avoid them. And we could even say they curry favor with them. They're nice to them when they really don't mean it, in order to protect themselves from their indecency. So that was the hadith. And what we want to do now is kind of expand on some of the parts of the hadith that we weren't able to expand on in the khutbah. So the first thing we want to start at the outset and talk about or expand on is that statement of the Prophet. Granted permission, what an awful brother of his tribe or son of his tribe. We mentioned the khutbah, when we mentioned this part, we said, listen, we as Muslims have been taught that disparaging a Muslim in his absence is backbiting. That's what we've been taught. We've also been taught that this backbiting is a major sin. So how do we square that with this apparent act of backbiting seemingly committed by the Prophet ﷺ himself? How do we what? How do we square that? So the first thing, a few questions. What is backbiting? What is it? What's the definition of backbiting in our religion? The Prophet ﷺ, once he was with his companions, the hadith of Muslim collected by Muslim authority Abu Hurairah. The Prophet asked his companions, he said, do you know what constitutes backbiting? They said, Allah wa Rasuluhu. They said, Allah and His Messenger know best. It's when you say something about another Muslim in their absence that they wouldn't like. So then a man from the people, he said, Ya Rasulullah, أَفَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَانَ فِي أَخِي مَا أَقُولُ. He said, but what if what I say is actually true? Whatever I say about my brother is actually true. He said, إِنْ كَانَ فِيهِ مَا تَقُولُ فَقَدْ اِكْتَتَبْتَ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهِ فَقَدْ بَهَدْتَ. He said, if what you say is actually in him, if it actually is true, then you have committed backbiting. And if it's not in him, if what you say is not true, you have slandered him. Y'all see that? So now, based upon this hadith, we see that there are basically, okay, so if we just take the surface of the hadith and the surface of what the Prophet said, it might seem like what? It might seem like what? This is okay, this fits the description. The Prophet did that. Astaghfirullah. But if we look deeper, we'll see that there are 4 qualifiers for a statement that's made about another person to be backbiting. There are four qualifiers. So let's look more closely and let's extract those qualifiers. The first qualifier, Ikhwan, is the person that you speak about in their absence in a negative way has to be they have to be a Muslim. How do we know this? Huh? Ahsan, akhaka wa akhi. He said, dhikruka akhak, your brother, meaning what? Another Muslim, your brother in faith. And he said, أَفَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَانَ فِي أَخِي مَا أَقُولُ. He said, well, what about if what I actually say is in my brother? That's a characteristic of his. Y'all see that? So that's the first one. It has to be a Muslim. That's the first qualifier. Second qualifier has to be what? Fil ghiyab. He has to be absent, not present. And that's in the name, al-ghiba. Why is it called al-ghiba? يعني سميت الغيبة غيبة لأنها تحصل في غياب المغتاب. It's called ghiba because it happens what? In the absence. Ghiba comes from ghaba, which means what? To be absent. It's called ghiba because what? The person you're talking about is not present. So the first qualifier is what? Muslim. Second qualifier has to be absent. If he's right here, and I say, Dr. Ali, you're real tall. He can't say, oh, man, you're backbiting me. No, you're present. He's right here. Like number 3 from the qualifiers, it has to be negative. It has to be negative. ذِكْرُكَ أَخَا بِمَا يَكْرَهُ. He doesn't like it. If I say, Dr. Ali, you're so handsome, he can't say, oh, you're backbiting, man. No, I'm praising him. Y'all see that? Number 4 from the qualifiers, it has to be ahsan. It has to be true. Because in the hadith, the guy said, أَفَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَانَ فِي أَخِي مَا أَقُولُ. He said, no, what if it's true? He said, إِن كَانَ فِيهِ مَا تَقُولُ فَقَدْ اِغْتَتَبْتَ. He said, that is backbiting. When you say what's true, if you said something which wasn't true, you would be slandering him. So how many qualifiers? What are the qualifiers? Muslim. Number 2, fil ghiyab, he has to be absent. Number 3, has to be negative. Number 4, has to be true. Y'all see that? So now, let's go back to the hadith and ask ourselves a question. Was it backbiting? And I'm going to give you a hint. That the man's name, as Al-Qadi Iyad and other experts and historians mention, his name was Uyayna bin Hisn. And he was a munafiq. He was a munafiq. And the Prophet knew he was a munafiq. So now, was what the Prophet did backbiting? No. It was not backbiting because he was not a Muslim. So the Prophet ﷺ was actually giving a nasiha, actually warning the people of his household, hey, this is not a good dude. This guy's a munafiq, and not only is he a munafiq, he's a munafiq with what? Very bad character. He doesn't behave well. He doesn't treat people well. He doesn't talk nice. He's belligerent. He's brutish. He's insolent, etc. and so on. I feel it's important to mention, though, because when we talk about the qualifiers and etc., I don't want it to make anyone think that backbiting isn't a serious crime. Backbiting is a major sin. بالإجماع. قال القرطبي رحمه الله تعالى لا خلاف أن الغيبة من الكبائر. He said there's no difference of opinion amongst the scholars regardless of madhab. That backbiting is a major sin. It's a sin that requires a tawbah. ويدل ذلك, and this is evidence and supported, this ijma' is supported by the hadith collected by Abu Dawud and authority of Anas, in which the Prophet said, رَأَيْتُ حِينَ أُسْرِيَ بِي. He said, I saw during the Isra, I saw رِجَالًا لَهُمْ أَظْفَارٌ مِنْ نُحَاسٍ يَخْمِشُونَ بِهَا وُجُوهَهُمْ وَصُدُورُهُمْ. He said, I saw some people in the hellfire with nails made of brass. And they were taking those nails and doing what? Scratching the skin off their face and off their chest. فَسَأَلْتُ جِبْرِيلَ, I asked Jibreel, مَنْ هَؤُلَاءِ? I asked him, who are these people? And he said, هَؤُلَاءِ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ لُحُومَ النَّاسِ وَيَقَعُونَ فِي أَعْرَاضِهِمْ. He said, these are the people who eat other people's flesh, the people who commit backbiting. وَيَقَعُونَ فِي أَعْرَاضِهِمْ. And they attack their what? Their honor. They attack their honor, or they drag their honor through the mud. So if we understand this, brothers and sisters, we understand that backbiting is something that must be avoided. We really have to try hard to avoid it, even though it's something that's very, very common. To the point that Imam Ahmad, he said, لو كانت الغيبة من نواقض الصيام ما كان للناس صيام. He said, if ghiba was one of the things that will break a person's fast, nobody would ever have a fast that would be accepted by Allah, because it's so common. It's so common for people to what? Commit al-ghiba. But even though it's common and a lot of us fall into it, doesn't mean we should make effort. We have to make effort not to commit al-ghiba. And the only time that it's an exception to the rule is in certain what? Very, very exceptional cases, or in very, very exceptional circumstances. And the scholars of Islam have mentioned 6 exceptional cases. One of those exceptional cases is when one has suffered injustice and files a complaint. Somebody has suffered injustice and files a complaint against the one who committed the act of injustice. So, for example, a person has a neighbor, and that neighbor has done what? Has moved the property line, has moved the easement, taking 3 feet, 5 feet of your property. The only way for you to get the property line back to its original state is to go and complain to somebody who can make that happen. And you have to name the defendant, right? You have to name them. That's an exceptional case. Another example, seeking aid in curtailing criminal activity. So-and-so is doing such and such of criminal activity. I don't have the ability to stop them. I have to go to the authorities and tell them that so-and-so is doing such and such. That's an example. Another example, when seeking religious verdicts. Famously, the wife of Abu Sufyan, she went to the Prophet ﷺ complaining and seeking a religious verdict because she said, "Huwa shahih, la yu'tini ma yakfini, wa yakfi awladi." She said, he's stingy. He doesn't give me enough money to support myself and to support my kids. What am I supposed to do? She was seeking a religious verdict. Another example is alerting fellow Muslims to the potential harm an individual might cause them. So let's say, for example, there was somebody in the Muslim community and he was defrauding people. He was literally defrauding people. He was promising them that he would do a service for them, or he was offering to sell them a product, or whatever it was, and he was defrauding people. And people have been defrauded by him. And so you go to them and you tell them, hey, don't accept the offer, don't agree to invest in the service or the business, whatever it is. Because why? He's defrauded so-and-so and such and such. You're doing that to protect them. This would be an example of what? Acceptable backbiting, or a case where that would be acceptable. Also, an exceptional case is when speaking of a well-known sinner regarding the sins he commits openly. There's somebody who does something openly. They do a sin openly. For example, they drink alcohol in public, and they've been seen and confronted, publicly intoxicated, publicly inebriated. And the person says, yeah, man, so-and-so, man, he's always drinking. I don't know what to tell him. It's an addiction. He needs to go get checked in. A person could say that about something he does what? Publicly. And it's not really ghibah, because why? He himself is what? He's doing it publicly. And everybody knows about it. And last but not least, sometimes a person is muqtar, he's forced or compelled to do something which seems like it's backbiting in order to specify or identify someone. So, for example, let's say there were 6 people in our community named Farid. And a person said, yeah, I was talking to Farid yesterday. He says, which Farid? You say, Farid, the tall one. He says, they're all tall. So, you know the one that's from the Northeast. They're all from the Northeast. He says, the one who likes to wear the white thobes. They all wear white thobes. You say, the one who walks with a limp. Oh, okay, no, I know him. You guys see that? I had to say it, not because I want to insult him or disparage him, because in order for you to know who I'm talking about, in order to identify him. So these are some exceptions to the rule, and that's that conversation about what I wanted to share about that first part of the hadith, the appearance of al-ghibah. We mentioned that this man, Uyayna bin Hisn, he was an awful person, and the Prophet, an excellent judge of character, wasn't fond of him. And the Prophet had every reason to believe that he was up to no good. But he still welcomed him into his home, spoke to him kindly, and treated him well. We said that to the casual observer, to the casual observer, this might seem hypocritical, or at the very least confusing. He spoke about him disparagingly. It's clear that he didn't like him, wasn't fond of him, brought him into his home, welcomed him to his home, spoke to him kindly, treated him well. It's like, how do you square that? Might seem to the casual observer as hypocritical, or at least confusing. We know it's confusing. That's why Aisha herself was confused, to the point she asked the Prophet. So here what I want to say, brothers and sisters, is that duplicity is basically, another way to say it in our vernacular, is being two-faced. Right? Duplicity, being two-faced, is a bad characteristic that a Muslim should avoid developing or demonstrating. A person should not be someone, when he meets with this person, he's a certain way. When he meets with that person, he's a different way. A Muslim should not be a chameleon. He should not be someone who he is determined by what? By the setting. Y'all see that? If I'm with the conservatives, I'm conservative. If I'm with the liberals, I'm liberal. If I'm with the people who, do argila, they smoke that hookah. I smoke the hookah, right? He shouldn't be there. A Muslim should not be that. A Muslim should not be, I am whatever vessel you put me in. Whatever setting I'm in, I will be whatever that is. أنا مع الناس. Right? إذا أحسنوا أحسنتم. وإذا أفسدوا أفسدتم. You see that? I shouldn't be the person who I'm with the people. Whatever the people do. If they do good, I'll do good. If they do bad, I'll do bad. The Prophet said, إن شر الناس ذو الوجهين الذي يأتي هؤلاء بوجه وهؤلاء بوجه. He said, the worst of people, one of the worst of people is the one who is two-faced. Meets these people with a face and meets these people with a very different face. So now that being said, as is the case with any rule, there are some exceptions. So sometimes what happens is being yourself, and as they say, keeping it real. The harm of doing that outweighs the benefit. And I'm talking about religious harm, not what's easy for me, not what's convenient for me, or allows me to get something from this dunya. We're saying sometimes there's the potential for religious or spiritual harm if you keep it real, and so you have to what? You have to just I hate to put it like this, you have to kind of like fake it. You have to pretend to like someone, pretend to respect someone, pretend to get along with someone, just because why? The harm of not doing so will outweigh the benefit. And there's a qaida in our religion that says, دَرُ الْمَفَاسِقُ وَقَدَّمَ الْجَلْبِ الْمَصَالِحِ. That preventing harm always is given precedence over procuring benefit. If this person can harm you, they're going to say something or do something that will harm you or harm your family or put you in a compromised situation. You may be forced to what? To jamilhum. You may be forced to what? To just what? To be nice to them and curry favor with them, just to what? To get yourself out of that situation. And this situation the Prophet was in was an exceptional case. Y'all see that? And that's why the Prophet operated the way he operated, not because the Prophet is duplicitous, but because what? The situation and circumstances demanded that was the best way. It was prudent for him to behave in that way. So then after we talked about how Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet, well, square this for me, O Messenger of Allah. Make this make sense. I don't understand. You said what you said and you were nice to him. Can you make it make sense? The Prophet said, إِنَّ شَرَّ النَّاسِ مَنْ تَرَكَهُ النَّاسُ وَوَدَعَهُ النَّاسُ وَمُمْكِنْ يُقَالْ مَنْ جَامَلَهُ النَّاسِ اتقاء فحشه. He said, indeed, the worst of people is the one whom people abandon or avoid, or even they do what? They curry favor with them. They're nice to them in order to spare themselves his indecency. In other words, there are some people in the world, we said, who are nasty. They're belligerent, they're brutish, and uncouth by nature or by upbringing. Some people actually are taught to behave in this way. Interacting with them, we said, is painful, it is harmful, and it's seldom beneficial. And people often treat them kindly not because they've earned their respect or are entitled to kindness, but because that's the only way they can avoid what? Avoid them saying or doing something ignorant. There's just some people like that. So the few things I want to say about this part of the hadith, number one, there are people. These types of people, they exist. We'd like to avoid them, but we're forced to deal with them. The second thing is that sometimes it's prudent and it is from wisdom, or wisdom requires that we deal with them in a way that minimizes their harm. Allows us to get through the interaction with minimal harm, minimal injury. And this approach, when you're doing it with this intention, what we could call mudarat, when you do it with this intention, it's from makarim al-akhlaq. As the Prophet said in the hadith, إِنِّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمْ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. He said, I have only been appointed, I've only been sent. The main reason I was appointed was to demonstrate the exalted standard of character. The Prophet is teaching us that there are situations you're going to be in, O Muslim, where you have one of these belligerent people who's your interlocutor. You have no choice but to what? You have no choice but what? Just kind of massage the situation and be kind, just to what? To maneuver out of that interaction. And that's from makarim and akhlaq. Now another thing that's important to take away from this, the Prophet knew that he was a munafiq. He was a munafiq, he was a non-Muslim. So think about that. If the Prophet treated a non-Muslim this way, who was a munafiq, an enemy of Allah, an enemy of Islam, we treat him in this way, how much more so should we treat what? other Muslims kindly. And then pause for a second. And then think about, go through the Rolodex in your mind and think about the times when you interacted with a Muslim and it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't nice. You didn't say the nicest things. You didn't interact with them in the best way. And you could have. It wasn't an issue or a situation where you had to what? You had to be harsh. You chose to. That's wrong. Like sometimes we have interaction with Muslims who can be belligerent. And so we match their energy. We do that. But if you can, the hadith is kind of indicating even those people we should be kind to. And if we should be kind to them, how much more should we be kind to the people who are what? They're gentle. They're soft-hearted. They're kind. Or even worse, they're vulnerable. How many times do we get in situations where there's somebody who you can run over them? And you know you can run over them, so you what? You run over them. These are the people who we what? We should be more gentle with because of their vulnerability. But in a roundabout way, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, a Muslim, don't be that guy. Don't be that kind of person. In a roundabout way, the Prophet is saying, there's people like this. Don't be one of them. Don't be from the people, and there's a lot of people like this. They confuse or conflate fear with respect. Y'all know what I'm saying? Are they the same? Is being feared and being respected, are they the same? No. And ask yourself honestly, do you want to be feared by people or do you want to be respected by them? Do you want people to be nice to you because they're afraid of what you might do? Or do you want them to be nice to you because what? They respect you. They think they owe it to you. This is important for people in general. It's important for parents with their kids. A lot of parents can conflate fear with respect. Right? They want to strike fear into kids. When they come in, the kids stand attention. That's what they want. They think, oh, see, they respect me. No, they're afraid of you. And that might work when they're little. But it'll hurt you when what? When they get older. They won't want to be around you. And they'll remember the trauma. They'll remember the fear. They'll remember how much they hated for you to come. And when you left, they were so happy for you to leave. Nobody wants that. And so we should all be striving to be respected. And in order to be respected, you have to be respectful. Be somebody who people want to respect because you're kind, because you're nice. And sometimes what that means is you're nice even when people aren't nice to you. Famously, and there's a difference of opinion about the authenticity of this, but famously, the Prophet ﷺ, he had people in Mecca who would mistreat him. Famously, there was a woman who used to throw trash at the Prophet's door. And he would find the trash, and he knew who threw it. But he wouldn't say anything. He would just gather the trash and dispose of it appropriately. But one day, that lady got sick. And the Prophet ﷺ went and visited her in her illness. And when that happened, she's like, you visited me after all the mean things I did to you? And she did what? She accepted Islam. See how the Prophet earned her respect by what? By matching her cruelty with what? With kindness. Last but not least, we said in the khutbah when we were trying to wrap everything up and just kind of make sense of what the Prophet did. We said the Prophet was not being hypocritical. He was being smart. You can't fight fire with fire, we said. You must use water to extinguish it. We said meeting cruelty with cruelty leads to more cruelty, a never-ending cycle. You're cruel, they're cruel to you, you're cruel to them, they match your cruelty, you match their cruelty. And just what? Just on that hamster wheel, never getting off. And we said that sometimes the best way to overcome somebody's cruelty is to kill it with what? Kindness, or subdue it with kindness. Like I wanted to kind of like add some nuance to some of the things I said there. So one thing we said, you can't fight fire with fire. Like you can never do it. And this is something which is generally true. It just doesn't work. You fight fire with fire and you burn everything down. Generally speaking. But sometimes it's necessary. And others leave you no choice. They leave you no choice. No option but to match their energy. And to do to them what they do to you. And we know that that's acceptable Islamically. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ فَاعْتَدُوا عَلَيْهِ بِمِثْلِ مَا بِمِثْلِ مَا اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ. I'm sorry, بِمِثْلِ مَا اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُم. He said, and so whoever transgresses against you, match what? Their transgression. Do to them what they did to you. You have some people in this world, brothers and sisters, who are heartless, they're inhumane, and because of that, you can't appeal to their heart, you can't appeal to their humanity. Because they have none. And so all these efforts to kill them with kindness are ineffective. That does not move them. That does not move the needle with them at all. And one example that we've seen for the last 2 years and change is what's going on in Gaza. There's no amount of concessions. There's no amount of capitulation. There's no amount of giving in that will satisfy them. They will not be satisfied until they exterminate those people. Nothing will satisfy them. The ceasefire wasn't even 3 days old. And they started bombing them again. And they justify it with any justification. Why? Not that even, sometimes they don't even try to justify it. Because at the end of the day, their goal is clear. It's just to what? To exterminate. And we're talking about 75 years of this. Of giving up land, acquiescing, different accords, different agreements, where they always have to do what? To make all these concessions and capitulate. And the more they give, the more they take. The more they try to stop their aggression, the more they transgress. And so I don't think there's a language that those people understand except the language of violence. That somebody has to match their violence. And somebody has to force them. They have to be forced to stop being violent. I understand that this is not something that the people of Gaza are able to do. They don't have the ability to match that violence. But we've also seen how when people did have the ability to match that violence and match that cruelty with cruelty, we saw what happened. They backed down. They backed down. We saw it not too long ago. And so I say all this to say is that this, you can't fight fire with fire, is generally true. This is al-asl. But there are some exceptions to that rule. It just doesn't work with some people because they're heartless and they're inhumane. Another I guess qualifier or exception to the rule is that listen, sometimes it's prudent to match a person's energy, not because they're inhumane, not because they're heartless, but because people have a tendency to mistake kindness for weakness. They have a tendency to do that. And so sometimes you have to pick your spots where you're going to say, what, you know what? I'm gonna apply shiddah. I'm going to be harsh. I'm going to match the person's energy, match their cruelty. Not because I'm like that. Not because I really want to do that. But because what? If I don't do it, not only will they think I'm weak, other people will think I'm weak and I'm taken advantage of. So you're forced to what? You're forced to what? To let somebody know that I can bite back. That's not the normal way you operate, but there are exceptions to the rule. And that being said, I'll close by saying this harshness has its place. It has its place. And too often do people say, hey, you weren't nice enough. You didn't say that nice enough. Sometimes you have to be harsh because of the importance of the issue. Because it's not about you, it's about Allah or about the deen that you're trying to defend. And you have instances in the life of the Prophet, in the life of his companions, where they did that. Not because they thought that was the right thing to do. They understood that the Prophet said, Inna Allah rafiqun yuhibbu ar-rifq. The al-asl ar-rifq. Allah is gentle and loves gentleness. They know that this is the original rule, the original case. It's what we should be, generally speaking. But there are some exceptions. We see it from the Prophet, we see it from his companions. We see it from the khulafa. And so there are instances where you have to what? You have to stand for something. Otherwise, you'll fall for anything. And with that, brothers and sisters, we bring our remarks on the khutbah to a close, and we have about maybe like 10 minutes or so for any questions or comments if anybody has any. Tafaddal, Dr. Ismail.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Let me give you a mic.
I think there are some additional exceptions.
Tafadhal, please.
I think, look,
Yeah.
I think there are some additional exceptions.
Yes.
I have had some personal experience too. I suffered. That is, if somebody.
Did yours turn off? Did it turn
It's
off?
on.
Is it on?
Look.
Yeah, it is.
It's on.
Speak into it, Doctor.
Somebody comes to you
Yes, perfect.
and or from outside informs you that my daughter is going to be married to a person in your community.
Ahsant.
And so could you please check it out and let us know whether it is suitable.
Eh.
So I think in that case, I think we have been advised that in this particular case, you can reveal the truth.
Eh.
And even though that might look like
Backbite.
backbiting.
Eh.
And unfortunately, this happened to me twice. Once in Calgary, somebody from California called me, one of this person from your community, we are going to get married, because he said that he has a master's degree in some in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to that person. I knew him sufficiently, but I went to him personally and talked to him. And I knew from others how I investigated, and then I informed them. Then they canceled the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew exactly who told him.
But you saved her though. You saved the girl though. Jazakallah.
And this thing also happened here in this area too. So I think in that case, I think we have been given the advice that in this particular case, you can tell the truth, but how do you protect yourself is another problem.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that kind of falls into the category of warning people in the community.
Yeah.
So it could be a warning, a general warning. This person's a fraud. He cheats people out of money. Don't invest in his products or services. But it could also be like what you said.
It also depends upon that person who you are relating the information. He could handle it more appropriately. Can give some other excuse. Instead of that, he told exactly what I told him.
No, they shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have done that.
This is the problem that you run into, is that he's doing you a favor, and then you
No, they shouldn't have done that.
You don't.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
That's why I think in these cases, I think we have to be very diplomatic, and then also advise the other party, this is what is the situation, and you handle it carefully. So I learned the lesson twice. The second thing is, I think we saw the politics of this election, and you see that not only there is backbiting, but there is also slander.
Slander, a lot of it.
So, but in many cases, if things are clear, then you know who is telling the truth and who is not. And exposing these things sometimes is beneficial because you are selecting the appropriate person. So democracy allows that. In the Islamic world, that process is not there, and we see the leaders get elected who are really corrupt, who are who can do a lot more harm. And I'm sorry to say what's happening in Pakistan.
Allah
such a sad situation. So I want to close with that.
Jazakallah khair. I really appreciate that. To be honest with you, I've been going back and forth about whether or not to speak on the subject of that most recent election involving the first Muslim mayor-elect in New York City, with a significant Jewish population. They've had, at least that I know of, 2 or 3, maybe have been more, Jewish mayors. And everything that was said leading up to the election, and everything that's been said since. In fact, there was something that I read just before coming over. There's an actor, I think his name is John Voight. I might not have the name exactly right, but Voight, I'm pretty sure about the last name. Al-Muhim, this guy basically wrote an open letter to the occupant of the White House, demanding that he basically nullify the mayoral election and not let him, take his rightful place, his He won a fair and free election, and he won it with, I think, 56% or more of the vote. And he's basically saying, nullify that because of what we believe he might do. And using words like socialism and communism, and all this is more Red Scare. It's let's use luck up 10 feet. Let's just say something that's going to scare everybody and attach it to somebody's name in order to convince them to be so scared that they will what? What this teaches me is a few things, and I'm trying to figure out how to put it forth but what it teaches me a few things. One, these people do not believe in democracy. They don't believe in their own system of government that they claim to believe in and love, believe is the best system in the world, and they go around the world forcing it on other people. They don't even believe in it. Because if you believe in it, it was a free and fair election, he won fair and square. You just accept the results. When we lose, we don't believe in democracy anymore. That's number one. Number two, this has nothing to do with socialism or communism or anything else. This has everything to do with his brown skin and the place where he worships. And this is the thing about prejudice. It is always cloaked with or mixed with cowardice. Most people who are prejudiced won't come out and say it. There are some people who are brave enough to say, yeah, I'm prejudiced and I'm proud of it. But most people, they'll hide behind socialism, communism, or some other ism that they attribute to somebody that everybody generally thinks is bad, when it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what? It has everything to do with the color of his skin, the country where he originally came from, the fact that he's a Muslim. Those are the things that really, really matter to them and really, really inspire their hatred and their vitriol. We know it has nothing to do with we just want somebody who's going to do good governing. Because the same person you're reaching out to do good governing, what governing is he doing? Is it good governing? What democracy does he support? What pillar of democracy does he uphold? What corruption has he not committed and been involved in, engaged in? How many felonies has he been convicted of? Right? I mean, what is it about him other than what? That he shares my identity. He shares my identity. He shares my commitment to white supremacy and my hatred for the other. What is it about him that makes you write an open letter to him, telling him to nullify an election? Y'all see that? I say this to say is that, wallahi, it's something I want to talk about. I want to figure out how to talk about it and how to package it in a way where it's not emotional. It's something that we need to learn. I'm telling you, one of our problems is, I think, as a community, is we don't acknowledge the existence of prejudice. Or we don't acknowledge the existence of prejudice against us because we're Muslim. We think that some of us think we're exceptions to the rule. They just hate black people. They just hate brown people. No, they hate all of the others. They just pick on the others one by one because you can't pick on all of them at the same time. You have to pick them off one by one. If we attack all of them at the same time, they outnumber us. And so we need to realize that we're all in the crosshairs. And I think figuring out how to package that and present it is my dilemma. Because this election has really, really revealed a lot of things. If people are paying attention, you should really be awake. A lot of us have been deluded. Oh, democracy is great and democracy accepts everybody and so inclusive and anybody can be the president. Anybody can be the mayor of New York City. Anybody can do it. They accept everybody. They don't care about race, religion, creed, sexual orientation. They just care. This is what we have led ourselves to believe. But show me an election where so much hatred and so many people from different walks of life have been so triggered by a candidate. Show me anywhere his name is mentioned. Look at what people say. Look at the things, the lies that they tell, open lies. And you can tell it's something, they can't say what it really is, but they say everything else. But if you're paying attention and reading between the lines, they're basically saying, we hate him because he's brown. We hate him because he's Muslim. He shouldn't be the mayor because he's Muslim. Jews are not going to feel safe because of Muslim. Okay, well, should the Muslims have felt unsafe when Rosenberg was the mayor and when Koch was the mayor and these other Jews were the mayor? Should we have been unsafe? And where was the speaking out on behalf of these Muslims who should have felt unsafe? You guys see that? You see the double standard? I see I'm just spinning off because it really grates my gears. I'm sorry. طيب تفضل Dr. Ali, you wanted to say something.
Oh, just briefly, my mic is gone.
Okay, I got it. This one. This is working. I think that one had weak batteries anyway. تفضل شيخ. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Salam.
barakatuh. Imam, as you were giving the khutbah, I reflected on our mother Aisha and her bravery to essentially confront the Prophet with that question.
جزاك الله خير.
And because of her bravery and her willingness to question the Prophet, we have learned all this information. So I just wanted to recognize our mother for what she did.
جزاك الله خير. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful نقطة. That was very good. جزاك الله خير Dr. Ali. Very good point.
Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
So I just want to expound on when you said fight fire with fire. Because fight fire with fire is going to lead to more fire. And the only thing that's going to extinguish that fire is going to be water. So with that being said, I want to expound on that in life, we have to be wise of what we choose to take confrontation in and when to just withdraw from confrontation. This week for me personally has been a very trying week. And life is not checkers. In many ways it can be chess. And I had a situation earlier this week. And you speaking about there's times fire to be met with fire. I'm like, man, why couldn't I heard this 5 days ago? Because I actually really had to address someone who is an elder of mine, and I really respect my elder, so it kind of hurt me to have to do this, but it was definitely needed at the time because it had been prolonged for over a year. And my energy completely matched the energy that he had been expounding towards in my direction for over a year. And I was respectful about it, but he definitely got the point. He definitely backed off. But I said to say this, next week I'll be out the country, and it's like Shaitan has really just come at me with so much because it's almost like he knows that I'm about to go to something greater, and he's just throwing every arrow he can throw at me to try to distract me, from my journey. But mashallah. Kept me safe all this time. They continue to keep me safe.
May Allah protect you. تفضل عبد الملك.
I just want to, I can just ask this as a straight question. Allah will continue to increase your knowledge. You might want to explain everything, but I just want to go straight to one. So I think the issue of being a monarch, you and I know, everyone knows that there's Nifaq al-Aqadi and Nifaq al-Amal.
جزاك الله خير.
And
It's not to explain what.
he will explain. I'm just listening. Now, and because the hadith we know, where Rasulullah said that Allah is going to fire haram on someone who says La ilaha illallah. And the way that hadith occurred was one of the companions who did the Salah had his sides, as Allah would have to go to the masjid because he couldn't see properly. And he asked Rasulullah to come to him in his house so that he could establish a part of his house for Salah. And Abu Bakr went with him and some of the other companions. And right there, they started discussing about another person. And one of them even said he's a munafiq. Then Rasulullah said, didn't he used to say, La ilaha illallah? And he seeks, what is Allah with that? And then the hadith came that, Allah will not make fire. Someone who says La ilaha illallah to bring fire for fire. So what I'm just trying to us, we should, if you can help us differentiate that and ayatul munafiq, with information, so that people won't say, because this person promises and he goes against his promise, now he's a munafiq, and therefore he's not a Muslim, then I do not write. Do you get it?
Yeah. Ahsan. Okay, that's a very good point. Jazakallah khair. طيب, okay. So, when we're discussing the hadith, we mentioned that this Uyayna ibn Hisn, as the experts and the historians, they said that he was a munafiq. And we said also that because he was a munafiq, that permitted the Prophet, that gave him license to what? To say what he said, or to say what he said in his absence. And so now Abdul Malik, he makes a good point. He said, so does that mean, because the Prophet said, Ayatul Munafiq Thalath, and in another hadith he said, Arba'u man kunna fihi kana munafiqan khalisan ila akhir al-hadith. So the Prophet in one hadith he said there are 3 characteristics of a hypocrite. In another hadith he said there are 4 characteristics of a hypocrite. And he mentioned either hadatha kadhab, if he speaks he lies. With wa'ad akhlaf, if he promises he breaks his promise. With a tumina khan, if he's entrusted with something he betrays the trust. With a khasam fajr, and if he argues he curses and becomes insolent and indecent, etc. So now he's saying, okay, so does that mean that if a person demonstrates one of these characteristics, that makes him a munafiq, and so therefore we can backbite? Oh, he lied, so khalas, I can, all bets are off. It's fair game. He didn't, I trusted him with something and he didn't fulfill the trust, etc. So it's a very important discussion that Abdul Malik is alluding to, is that when the scholars of Islam talk about so-and-so was a munafiq, they're not talking about a nifaq al-amali. They're not talking about the person who does something which is a characteristic of the hypocrites indeed. They're talking about a person who's a hypocrite in terms of what? Their belief. A person who presents himself as a Muslim, but internally does not believe and is an enemy of Islam, is plotting against Islam. That's what they're talking about. And these are the people who they're non-Muslim. A Muslim may demonstrate some of the qualities of the munafiqeen. A Muslim may lie. That's not a good thing, and that Muslim would be sinful for doing that, but they would still be a Muslim. Lying does not take you outside the fold of Islam. You may entrust somebody with your lawnmower, right? Remember, the minute when you trust your lawnmower. This is an inside joke between me and Abdul Malik. You trust him with your lawnmower. You come back and your lawnmower is a mangled mess. He didn't fulfill the trust, right? A Muslim may do that. That will not take him outside the fold of Islam. A Muslim, you may get into an argument with a Muslim and he dog cusses you. A Muslim calls you every name in the book except your name. It could happen, and they would still be Muslim. They wouldn't leave the fold of Islam. And so when the scholars of Islam talk about a person being munafiq, like in the case of Uyayna ibn Hisn, they're talking about a person who is a munafiq, nifaq and i'tiqadi. They're a munafiq in terms of what they don't really believe. They're just pretending, feigning to be Muslim. They're not talking about the Muslim who may do some of the things that makes them resemble a hypocrite, but they have not left Islam. They're just a sinful Muslim who has some work to do. And so that's a very good point that you made. And so we should not, a Muslim makes a mistake, commits an error, and then we think all bets are off. You can backbite him because he's a munafiq, because he did this thing the Prophet called nifaq. There's something called nifaqun, the way the scholars put it is kufr duna kufr. There's something called disbelief less than disbelief, meaning there's a disbelief that takes you outside the fold of Islam, and then there are behaviors that are resembling of the way the disbelievers that do not take you out of the fold of Islam, right? And every believer makes mistakes, every single one of us, and some of us do the things that the Prophet called kufr. We do the things that the Prophet called nifaq. We do the things that the Prophet called shirk. But we do them, and the way that we do it, and the belief that we have in our heart when we do it, prevents us from leaving Islam, although it puts us in a very dangerous position and makes us sinful and required to repent. Does that answer it?
Exactly.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Any other questions, comments? Tafaddal, Sadiq.
Just one comment and one question. So, we talked about fight, literally sense, you do that. In forest, you have more slowly. So, what firefighters do, they do the controlled burning.
Yeah.
So that's using fire to fight fire.
Ahsan.
Really in the middle.
That fire could be beneficial in some cases.
Yes.
Ahsan. I like that analogy. Yeah.
Another question is, so when one of the hadiths you mentioned, one of the Sahaba, he was asked to assassinate one of the members of Islam, and then before he goes there, he asked the Prophet to allow him to curse him in front of the wedding. And then, of course, when he goes there, the Prophet asks him, would that be backbiting, or would that be an exception to the backbiting?
Okay, give it to me again, Sadiq. I didn't understand. It wasn't clear to me. You said that, and correct me, you said that the Prophet sent a man to assassinate someone.
Right. So when he was going there, he was talking to the men, right? And then while they're speaking, he got permission from the Prophet to speak badly about the Prophet.
To speak badly about the Prophet.
Right.
To basically disarm the person, make him think he was one of them.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a strategy. That's just a strategy. Yeah, that's a strategy. No, that wouldn't be. It wouldn't be. Because you got to figure,
Right.
Speaking bad about the Prophet is not like speaking bad about anyone else. Speaking bad about the Prophet is disbelief.
Right.
So what that tells you is that if the Prophet gave him permission, it was because what? It was a stratagem, and because it was something he said with his tongue that he didn't intend with his heart.
Let's say in a different scenario, let's say I'm spotted, right? And then I'm fighting an enemy. I need to curse my country's leader, Muslim, right?
Hey.
Without I did not get his permission. Would that be an exception to the rule?
Yeah, I think so, because again, it's a stratagem and something you need to do to fulfill your mission. As long as your mission was consistent with Islamic teaching, right? Not every time a ruler tells me to do something, am I in my legal right to do it, right? So that would be a very important caveat that we have to be sure that what we're doing is something sanctioned by Islam. If that were the case, then that would be definitely one of those exceptions. Definitely. Like anything else, going once, going twice.
Just real quick technical. When you said absence, we're talking about totally absent, not totally absent out the conversation. That person doesn't know. So like in an example, that person might have been out the door and he was going to come in, something was said. That's considered absent because he wasn't in the conversation to hear what was being said.
Ahsan, so he could be in the room.
Not location.
Ahsan, he could be in the room and just wasn't able to hear. Right. So for example, God forbid if Elijah and I started whispering and you're two people away from us, but you can't hear what we're saying and we say something negative about you, God forbid, that would be backbiting. Yeah, you don't have to be physically absent. Right. You have to be absent from the conversation. Is that a very good point?
Or even another language.
Well said. Another language, I said. Person could talk be right there in front of you, talking a different language. Or the other. Yeah. I want to say before we close out, Jazakumullah khairan for coming. I know that many of you are parents and you brought your kids, and we appreciate you guys coming and supporting these programs. And obviously the kids are our future. And we want to pour into them and invest as much effort and energy and programming as we can. And this is one of those examples. And the ladies, as you can see, they went to a great deal of trouble. Some of you might have went to some of the classrooms and you saw the decorations that they put up and the effort that they put in because, again, they really get it. May Allah reward all of them for the sacrifice and the effort that they made. They really understand the kids are our future. We need to pour into the kids. But obviously, it takes two hands to clap. We can do everything. We can decorate. We can get books. We can prepare lesson plans. We can do all those things, without you coming and showing up and supporting. It's ineffective. And so thank you all for coming and be a part of it. And let's continue to do this and continue to grow this program. We're hoping in the future we'll put like a dinner and some other things with it so the adults can stuff themselves. You guys can eat that stuff that you're not supposed to eat and eat more than you're allowed to eat because your wives won't be there to watch. So we're going to do all that, inshallah ta'ala. And just keep trying to grow the community. And we appreciate you guys being partners with us in that. May Allah bless you all and keep you safe and get you home safely.